More souls to feast upon!
Hey there folks, it's Blue here at Bluebeards Games, and once again, as I stated in yesterday's unboxing video, today's video will be an upgrade guide for the Ruinous Powers Warhammer 40k Commander Precon. During the unboxing video, I had mentioned that I wasn't a fan of how they used the Cascade ability, and that I may show upgrades that would take this in a Demon Tribal direction, but after some research, that is not the case anymore. In fact, I decided to actually lean even more into the Cascade theme by adding more support for it. As much as I wanted to finally do a Demon Tribal build, I realized that it just wasn't coming together the way I wanted. I did, however, notice that some of the non-Demon and non-Cascade themed cards, like Pink Horror and the Exalted Flamer Zench, leaned more into a Spellslinger theme, which I am a huge fan of. That led me to keeping the General as Abaddon for the guide, with the Cascade theme still intact, but with a couple of better options for that ability. So before I go into the list of upgrades, I want to remind everyone that if you need help with the mana fixing lands, please go to the upgrade guide I did last week on the Forces of the Imperium Warhammer 40k Precon. There you will find a general guide I did for all upgrade options for mana fixing lands. Now, let's take a look at about a dozen or so cards that could be swapped in that would help make the Ruinous Powers Precon a little better. The first change I would make, I'm a little confused, has to be made. Every WotC Precon over the last several years has included an arcane signet, yet for some reason this one did not. On the other hand, this Precon did have a chromatic lantern, whereas the one I unboxed last week did not, but sorely needed it. Regardless, I would absolutely put one in and take out the Commander's Sphere. The signet is 2 mana versus 3, and while the sphere can be sacked later to draw a card, I feel like the cascade aspect of the deck will make card draw less useful than ramping to get to that 5 to 6 mana threshold that a lot of the spells in this deck will cost. The next 3 cards I want to go over are mana rocks as well. I stated in the unboxing that my fear was that the average cost to cast the spells of this deck would be high, and I was right. To help alleviate this a little, I want to show you 3 mana rocks that actually have a cool interaction with Cascade. They are Soul Talisman, Mox Tantalite, and Lotus Bloom. All 3 of these are suspend versions of some of the best mana rocks in the game, but the suspend part makes them much weaker. However, when you cascade into a card with suspend, it allows you to cast that card, putting it into play. It's a pretty neat interaction that can make some cards much better and worth actually playing. These additions should help alleviate some of these high casting costs that this deck will run into. To make room for these 3, I would remove the Wayfarer's Bauble, Worn Power Stone, and Dark Ritual. Even if you have to suspend any of the rocks that I suggested, I feel that they are much better as options for ramp, but with the upside of being able to enter play immediately off of a cascade hit. Next, I have 4 creatures I would like to suggest that do very different things, but help advance the strategy of this build. First up is Ethereum Horn Sorcerer. At 6 mana to cast, its ability to cascade can help you hit some of those 5 mana value spells that will also cascade, making the ability's name actually hold true. There's just something satisfying about cascading into another cascade spell. Add in the fact that it has a built-in self-bounce effect, and you'll be playing out your entire deck in no time. Next is a creature called Wild Magic Sorcerer. It doesn't have cascade itself, but it does enable other spells to cascade. Note that the Wild Magic Sorcerer's ability triggers on the first spell you play from exile. Remember that any spell cast off of a cascade is cast from exile, so it will essentially give you a double cascade, which is exactly what you want here. Next, there is a card called Nalfshni. It lets you copy spells that were cast from exile, so with it in play, you'll get double the effect from any spell that was cast from the cascade ability. The last creature I'll suggest is called Creeping Bloodsucker. This inclusion would be to help Abaddon's Cascade ability be easier to actually take advantage of. Since the ability relies on total damage dealt to opponents, this creature will help get that number started early since the Bloodsucker's ability triggers on your upkeep. The 4 cards I would take out for these are Seeker of Slaanesh, Karn the Betrayer, Chaos Terminator Lord, and Drachnian. The 4 cards I suggested to swap in simply just synergize much better with the Cascade strategy than these 4 do. Now let me show you 4 sorceries that I feel would be good upgrades. First up is Call Forth the Tempest. The double cascade with that high mana cost means you'll pretty much be able to cast anything that's in your deck off the 2 cascade effects. This would end up being the highest mana value card in the deck, but it's worth it for what it does. The next 2 cards are very similar to each other, but slightly different. They are Into the Vortex and Throes of Chaos. Both of them simply just cascade, but at different mana values. The biggest difference between the two, though, is in how they are able to be used multiple times. Into the Vortex has Rebound, which only triggers if cast from your hand, and lets you play the spell a second time at the beginning of your next upkeep for free, while Throes of Chaos has Retrace, which lets you cast it again from your graveyard by discarding a land in addition to its other costs multiple times as long as you have enough land to do so. Like I said, very similar, but slightly different. The advantage to Throes of Chaos is in how many times you may actually be able to cast it compared to just the one extra time that Into the Vortex does. The last sorcery that I'll suggest is Volcanic Torrent. It too lets you cascade when you cast it, but this one actually has an effect on top of the cascade. It deals damage to creatures and planeswalkers your opponents control, equal to the amount of the spells you've cast this turn. Being that this deck will rely on a little luck to stack cascade triggers, the amount of damage that this can deal will vary wildly. The minimum will always be 2 because when it resolves, it will have counted itself plus at least the one spell that was cascaded by it. But after that, it will depend on what else has happened previously in the turn. The 4 cards that I would swap out to make room for these are Nurgle's Conscription, Bile Blight, Mandate of Abaddon, and Warstorm Surge. Again, these just don't really synergize as well with the Cascade theme as the 4 that I suggested. The removal spells are subpar, and Warstorm Surge can only hit one target when triggered, and in a multiplayer format, I like when damage can hit multiple targets if possible. My next upgrade suggestion is a little odd. Techie, but odd. I would throw in one of the oldest cards in the game, Pestilence. I make this suggestion for the same reason I suggested Creeping Bloodsucker. Abaddon's Cascade ability relies on how much damage in total all of your opponents have been dealt, and Pestilence deals it straight to everyone's domes for the low price of 1 black mana per activation. Pestilence being an enchantment also gives it a little more resiliency than if it were a creature, as long as you can find a balance between dealing the damage and not killing all of the creatures on the board. I would remove the Horus Heresy for this, because it just feels like a weird inclusion in the deck in general. I personally don't like it, so I was going to replace it no matter what anyway, so there you go. If I'm missing something with it, please let me know what it is. The final card that I'll suggest for this video is Professor Onyx. The static ability fits well in this deck when you're stacking Cascade effects, and even helps with Abaddon's Cascade ability, oddly enough. The loyalty abilities don't help much with the Cascade theme, but they are generically good enough to be useful. Putting cards in your hand, forcing opponents to sack their creatures, and forcing opponents to either discard cards or lose life are all beneficial and could prove useful throughout a game. I see no downside, and even the mana value of 6 can be beneficial if you can Cascade off of it. And finally, the last card that I'll suggest removing is Assault Suit. If it goaded the creature, I would have thought about maybe keeping it in, but the lack of forcing the equipped creature to attack is kind of dumb to me. Essentially, you're most likely just giving away a potential blocker of yours and giving it to someone else. Like, why would I want to do that? Again, if I'm missing something on this card, please let me know in the comments. Now, normally at this point of my upgrade guide videos, this is where I like to tell you a combo that involves the commander of the deck, but after a lot of research, I just couldn't find one. Yes, these colors combined have over 100 combos that can go infinite, but nothing I found in my research used Abaddon itself, so I won't be giving one for this guide, but I will tell you that if you do end up adding a Professor Onyx, look into Chain of Smog, and that's all I'll say. And there you have it, folks, my better late than never upgrade guide for the Warhammer 40k Commander Precon, the Ruinous Powers. This video is an example of why not to judge something too quickly. As I was going through the deck for the unboxing video, I hated the Cascade part of the deck, but after some time looking over it, I started to actually like what it wanted to do and realized that it just needed a little help. While not the best of the Warhammer 40k Commander precons, the upgrades I've suggested should at least make it a little more fun to play at worst, and actually win a few games at best. So that's all I have for you right now, but please be sure to join me next week where I'll be unboxing and upgrading the Tyranid Swarm Warhammer 40k Commander precon. Of the four, this is the one that I'm most excited to go through, so it should be a fun one. For me at least, anyway. As always, thank you for watching. Please remember to give the video a thumbs up, and I will see you all next week. Have a great day.